A former Toronto Raptor rival recently came out on the Bill Simmons podcast and discussed Masai Ujiri's master plan and why Toronto Raptors fans, in his opinion, shouldn't really be worried about the direction of this team or losing games or things along those lines. So we'll break down what he had to say, what it means for this Toronto Raptors team going forward, and really how we should feel about it. But before we dive into that, folks, happy Boxing Day to everyone out there. Unboxing your gifts, whatever you do on Boxing Day, box some people out. But one thing you could do on December 26th, whatever day it is subscribe to the Raptors Digest. Over half of our viewers are not subscribed to the channel, so it would mean the world to us if you guys could hit that subscribe button, as producing content daily here on the Toronto Raptors and want to deliver the news to you as fast as possible. But let's dive into this news, because recently Doc Rivers went on the Bill Simmons podcast and he had some very interesting sort of comments regarding the Toronto Raptors. And obviously Doc Rivers is the former coach of the Philadelphia 76ers, coached a lot of teams in the NBA, but was particularly, a division rival with the Toronto Raptors. We faced off against them in the playoffs just a couple seasons ago, so he knows the back and forth, the battles with the Toronto Raptors, Masai Ujiri, things along those lines, and his comments were pretty interesting. So we'll pull up just a little tweet breaking down some of the quotes, basically saying that Doc Rivers has told Bill Simmons that he thinks the Toronto Raptors are heading toward a rebuild. He says, "I don't think Masai Ujiri is upset with what's going on. Obviously, he'd like them to play better, but I think he just wants value, in potential trades, in potential negotiations." He went on a little minute tirade, so this isn't just the only quote that basically went on, but there were two real key takeaways in terms of what Doc Rivers was expecting for Masai Ujiri's plan going forth ahead of this year's trade deadline, ahead of everything that's going on. And one way to look at it is as a positive, is Masai Ujiri wants value, and maybe he didn't play his cards right, maybe it wasn't the right sort of approach, as a lot of people have criticized the Toronto Raptors in terms of decision-making, not making trades at last year's trade deadline as well as this off-season. However, Masai Ujiri's game is always to get as much value back as possible. So if he projects that OG Anunoby or Pascal Siakam could walk for nothing in this year's free agency, this might contradict what happened against Fred VanVleet, leaving last summer, but Masai Ujiri is going to scrape together as much value, as much pieces back for those two players as possible. So that's a positive way to look at it. And he basically went on to describe how Masai Ujiri's approach to these trade negotiations, things like that, is to squeeze as many assets as possible out of whatever team you're sort of talking with, negotiating with. And obviously, during Doc Rivers' tenure with the Philadelphia 76ers, he was on the other end of those trade negotiations, particularly when Kyle Lowry almost went to either the Miami Heat or the Philadelphia 76ers during that 2020, that bubble year for the the Tampa year for the Toronto Raptors. And, the Raptors turned down Tyrese Maxey, which might not have been clearly wasn't the right decision here in hindsight, but, he kind of knows how Masai Ujiri operates, and if deals are going to go down, if they're going to happen, Masai Ujiri is going to wait till the last minute. He's going to wait till the last second. So, Raptors fans shouldn't be worried if they're hoping for a rebuild, if they're hoping for things to blow up and change, and we've heard reports all over the place about what the Toronto Raptors could do, that it hasn't happened already so far this season, because we've heard about 8 different teams interested in both Pascal, OG, probably more teams in combination of both of them. So Masai Ujiri is going to let them bid, let them sort of struggle, let them sort of disappoint themselves and get more and more desperate ahead of this year's trade deadline, rather than sort of making a deal go down. So that's at least encouraging in some sense, because the worst possible scenario, the worst thing that could happen for this Toronto Raptors team is for these guys to walk for nothing. For really just our top guys to leave. I'm a broken record saying this, so I won't dive into it too deeper, but we don't want OG or Pascal to sort of devolve. But the real interesting part, the real sort of crux to what Doc Rivers is saying here, which I found most interesting, is how it's all going according to Masai Ujiri's plan. This is sort of what he was expecting. This is sort of the approach. He knew what was going to happen. And, obviously, pulling up the quote again, it'd be nice if they played better, talking about guys like Precious Achiuwa, Malachi Flynn, because Pascal, OG, maybe have taken a little bit of a step back, particularly Pascal's shooting. OG's shooting, I guess, a little bit as of late as well. But, it would have been nice, especially if the Precious Achiuwas, the Malachi Flynns really stepped up, really took their games to the next level under new head coach Darko Rajakovic, which probably was the reason he was hired, to be brought in to develop guys, to give him more opportunities, and more minutes have been going around, at least, especially at the start of the season. We'll see after Darko's recent comments how that will hold up going forward. The minutes have been getting cut a little bit more for the deep bench guys. No Steph Curry's on that Toronto Raptors bench there right now, but Masai Ujiri sort of looked at this year and said, hey, we could boost their sort of trade value. We're not getting the packages that we wanted to get offered, right? And we'll see if it all actually pays off. And this is what it all really boils down to. What it all really sort of breaks down to. I mean, we heard it 2 years ago when the Toronto Raptors, again, it was a mistake in hindsight. Didn't trade Kyle Lowry to the Philadelphia 76ers. An offer where we were apparently asking for Matisse Thybulle, who had a lot of trade value back then, Tyrese Maxey, who didn't have nearly the trade value he has right now, but definitely had some, being a young prospect guard that had some big moments for the Philadelphia 76ers at that time, but again, wasn't the projected all-star or anything like that, and 2 first-round picks. And Daryl Morey wasn't going to go for that, but Masai came out in those press conferences, Michael Grange, all those reporters came out and said, him holding true, standing strong with his players, with his packages, not giving in to potential trade discussions, means positive things for the Raptors trade negotiations in the future. It means teams won't be able to push Masai Ujiri around in negotiations in the future. Now, 2 years down the line, where the Raptors are really hitting a point, I don't want to call it super desperation, as we could potentially re-sign these guys, we could bring them back and things like that, but if we do go that rebuilding direction with our players entering free agency next offseason, we have to prove to these teams that they can't just sweep away Pascal Siakam, take away sort of OG Anunoby for nothing, the same way they tried to do with Kyle Lowry back in the past. Now, in hindsight, that would have been a complete finesse for the Toronto Raptors during that deal, during Doc Rivers' sort of tenure during that time. But, I mean, we'll see how it all plays out, because I feel like looking in our comment section, looking in Raptors Twitter, Reddit, all these types of places, I mean, we don't know what we should do. There's no clear direction with, not getting valuable pieces back for OG and Pascal Siakam, potentially letting them walk at free agency. This team has hit a roadblock, but apparently, according to Doc Rivers, it's all going as to plan. And, I'm holding faith. My optimism on the court has significantly been drained. It's not where it usually is for even a bad Toronto Raptors team. My hope is slowly wearing out, which is there on the basketball court, but I still am keeping hope. I'm still praying to the basketball gods that say, hey, Masai Ujiri has done it before. He's turned this team from a mediocre mess, during the Rudy Gay era, to early DeMar, Kyle Lowry, that sort of time, coming out of the Brian Colangelo sort of constructed rosters, those Bargnani teams, and quickly turned us around into a team that was contending again. And I'm praying that that's going to be the case with this current Toronto Raptors group. And at least Doc Rivers believes that this is all Masai Ujiri's plan as well, whether it's a rebuild or whatever direction we're going to end up going in. But let me know what you guys think about all this Toronto Raptors news. You guys are the best to make it as far. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.